This video is about lines, shapes, and forms, and a bunch of related things, such as organizing your thinking. So I do these kind of spontaneously. I have a rough plan, I make a few notes, and then I just wing it. So I've had some people ask me to do ones on perspective, which I will definitely do. There's a lot to say. But what I'm trying to do, as I said, is do my best to be natural and capture a kind of flow of thinking that you can get into. And I would maintain that it's a flow of thinking that you need in order to draw well. It's like an understanding of another language. And what I'm doing here, of course, is trying to externalize it. I'm trying to kind of put into words and attempt to explain to someone else something that's very elusive and ephemeral. It's thinking, and it's not words. It's just something in your mind or understanding or what have you. So that's to say, yeah, I'm going to improvise this and just try and explain. Okay, so what is this? I've got two things here. One thing underneath, and I've got this. This is a book I love. I've had this book for a long, long time. It's kind of a beaten up old friend. It's by Holscher and Springer, Engineering, Drawing and Geometry, 2nd edition, published by Wiley. And this old book came to me one day via my mother, who back then in the 70s, she worked part-time in the library at, darn it was either university or college, but anyway, in Ottawa. And she had found this in a stack of books that were going to be sold or thrown out from the library. They had some kind of sale. This is like a university level textbook. And so she thought, she knew I was like all over drawing and trying to learn. I was a teenager, so she brought it home. And it's one of those little things that if you grab onto something, it can kind of change everything because, or maybe you can call it synchromysticism for Jeff, who's listening, Jeff Bird, if he is listening, or you can call it, God winks, you can call it synchronicity. I don't know. It's just that it was the right thing at the right time. And I'll try and explain that too, because I was trying to study drawing both intuitively and sort of emotionally, where you just draw, back then it was spaceships and barbarians and all that great stuff. But I was also trying to understand the craft of drawing and the technical side of it. And as I've come to understand it later, a more objective analysis of drawing. So what is drawing? I mean, you're using 2 dimensions and you're using lines, if you're talking about drawing without shading. So you're using a language that's a symbolic language using just lines or marks, if you want to get more esoteric, on paper, and which is a flat surface, but you're trying to represent the 3-dimensional world. So there's a whole language to that. I was trying to figure that out. How does this all work? And how can I control this and make it something, within me that I can use? That's that's a craft. So this book somehow landed in my lap, and it had all kinds of great stuff. I'm just going to flip through it and then get to my more specific talk about lines, shapes, and forms. But these are different chapters. This I think is great, and I'll go over some of this in other videos because there's too much for just one, but this is just like a taste. This is about orthographic projection, really just projection. And one thing I should say at the start is I did not read this entire book, okay? There's like a lot in here, but I read sections of it that applied to me because it's a book that was meant for engineering students in the days before 3D computers. And I don't know how much they teach engineering people now to have in their minds. But before computers, you had to have all this stuff in your understanding in your mind. So they made them draw it and study all this stuff, how to draw things, project things. There's a chapter that's fascinating on intersections. And I even did a little bit of this in high school where we had drafting class and we did very careful mechanical drawings with ruling pens and compasses and set squares and things. Doing drawing somewhat like this, engineering type, very precise 3-view drawings. It trains your mind in a specific kind of thinking, I should say, a sort of an accurate thinking when it comes to forms. This is called sectional views, where they would understand sections through three-dimensional forms. And I'll skip ahead here. Shop terms. I think I like this. I put a post-it on this chapter, I think, simply because I liked some of the drawings in here. I'm not sure, but these post-its are from a while ago. I think I like some of these cool. Looks like they used even crafted drawing, like Roy Crane used with the two-step shading process to make these drawings. But anyway, moving ahead, there are problems, and there's a chapter back here on perspective, which again, people have asked me to do videos on perspective, like I might have mentioned earlier, and I will be doing that, but there's a whole ton to that too. Really what I'm trying to do here though is approach drawing videos. Some of them like this are to kind of try and show the thinking. You need almost a three-dimensional kind of thinking, and I'm trying to do videos that are a little bit different than ones you find already on YouTube or the internet, because I've dug into it, and there are, of course, tons. Some are really great, some are okay. Some of them maybe, frankly, are very formulaic. It's like, draw this, and you've drawn an arm. And that's okay, but it's a very rigid, kind of one-dimensional thinking. What's much better is if you build from the ground up and understand things, what I'd call three-dimensionally. So speaking of three-dimensionally, what I came across in this book one day was this great chart which shows forms. And let's see what they labeled it actually as. Where's the label for this chart? Oh, Paul, this guy Paul, I whited it out when I made this chart. Dumb me. But anyway, because I didn't want it reproducing, because I went and got this page reproduced. I'm going to put the book aside and then just get into my talk. But got my paper here. This chart is great because it's a chart of all the known forms. And if you want to learn to draw well, it's a very good piece of advice to understand form. So often in drawing books, like say the Marvel Way to Draw Comics or any number of other like similar books, they'll talk about things like drawing in form and solidity, but they never explain, of course, why. And it's not their fault. It's not a diss against those books. They're very useful books like that. But it's almost like they give you only a little partial taste and you have to take it the rest of the way and unlock it. So it can be kind of frustrating. So what they're depending on is a knowledge of form. And, again, they just almost assume that if John Buscema draws an arm as a cylinder, it's like, how do you draw a cylinder? So again, each of these things sort of unlocks into another subsection. I'm just trying to give an overview here. So here they go over basic forms, which I'll quickly read out and point to. So, for example, here we start with tetrahedron. It's a triangular. See, I gotta brush up on this myself, but yeah, it's a triangular pyramid, and cube, octahedron, and I'm sure anyone who's really up on this will correct me, a real engineer, but hey, I'm just an artist. But you needed at least a basic level of understanding this. It's a great help when you go to draw. Octahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron, a right pyramid, so it's a pyramid formed on the base of a square. Oblique pyramid, which is like taking this one and you can see shifting the point over, skewing it, which you could skew it any number of ways. A right prism, which is a right angle prism. So I guess what's that got? 6 sides, yeah. And then this is oblique, which is the same thing as over here when the pyramids got skewed. You've got a prism that's skewed. A right cone, which is the center line is 90 degrees from the base. An oblique cone, which again, you could have any number of these skewed in various ways. A right cylinder, oblique cylinder, same thing. Helical convolute, which I guess described by a helix wrapping around, it's the form or the planar surface, wrapping around a cylinder. I'm sure 3D artists who have done programming would know all about this, the people who built 3D modeling programs, because I'm pretty sure this is describing any known form or plane in the universe. Convolute sphere, oblate spheroid, prolate spheroid. So that's stretched in the horizontal aspect and the vertical aspect. Torus, which is like a donut ring. Hyperbolic paraboloid, right helicoid, oblique helicoid, hyperboloid of revolution, conoid. Down here you can't see them, I think it might be cut off, but cylindroid, hyperboloid of two sheets, and paraboloid. And then you might be asking, what the heck does all this matter? Well, I think it's interesting, but I think it informs the base of your thinking. So if you've never thought about any of this or never thought about drawing in this way or applying something like this to drawing, I think it could really change your thinking. And again, you don't have to have an engineering level of understanding or drawing of this. You don't need to do those textbook diagrams, but it does help if you understand some of it. And I'll try and talk about that here a little bit. So it's about ordering your thinking as much as you can. So what does that mean, ordering your thinking? It means that you think about things as clearly as you can figure out how to clear. You kind of untangle things. So there's three things I'll point out here. There's thinking in forms, shapes, and lines. So let me just grab my old friend, QB Rectangly. So say I draw this. See if I can do it quickly using my old method. It's hard to see actually on this, so I'll probably crap it up. Oops, that's off the paper. Told you I'd crap it up. Let's put it here. I'll just do this quick. Oops. Do the rest by eye. And it's very distorted because I put it very close to my eye. But that's good enough. These are converging. This is getting a little bit introspective. But what I want to point out here is, when it comes to form, shapes, and lines, is this thing is a three-dimensional solid. It's a certain kind of rectangle. It's not a square. Excuse me, I just made it to practice drawing. But when you see it from one angle, it has, and this is getting into concepts, I'll add silhouette. So what's the silhouette? The silhouette is the outer visible edge from one angle. So it's this, which as you can see makes a basic shape. How many sides does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so it's a hexagonal shape, okay? But then it itself, and it's representing a 3D form from one angle. But if you saw this 3D form from just flat, it would be almost a square, because it would just be like this. And then here it would be like more of a rectangle, a vertical rectangle. So the same form can have different shapes. So for example, here there's three shapes, right? There's this shape, call it A, and this shape, call it B, and this shape here, call it C. So if you think of an exploded view, you know, like if it flies apart, a cube would be like this. But depending on the angle of the cube, you know, you might have this as the 3D shapes. And this one might almost be like almost a line. It's very skimpy. So as things turn around, you're getting different shapes. And not only that, you're even getting different lines. Now, because this is a regular solid form with straight edges, all the lines are just straight lines of various lengths. But if you get into a 3D form, you know, the lines, shapes, and the forms vary, then the shapes vary more, and the lines vary even more. And I'll try and get into that in a little bit. What's very interesting here is there's only one form, 3D form, out of all of these, I believe, which has got the exact same silhouette no matter what angle you turn it to. And it has only one shape and really only one line. And do you know what that is? Well, some of them have one line, so I got to correct myself, but it's very cool. It's the sphere. Because if you draw a sphere, do your best to draw a sphere. It's a circle, right, when you're just drawing, but if you try and draw it from different angles, there's nothing, it's perfectly smooth and even. So there's nothing to draw if you're using the language of line drawing. And that's where we get into drawing like center lines on the 3 axes, which is the same as on a cube. It's a bit of a long cube, but anyway, you know, you've got, these are the center lines, but you've got center lines here. And when you get into more irregular forms, though, like say you take a cylinder in perspective, well, if you saw it from one aspect, it would be like this from the front, if you saw it from this angle. And then if you looked at it straight on from this view, you'd have just a circle, if it's a perfectly symmetrical cylinder. And then, of course, if you looked at the top, you'd also have the same thing again. So this is getting into me explaining like 3-view drawings. I use this 3-view. And it's what the engineering book was talking about, projections. So this would be like the top, side, front, and that would be like the three axes here, which would be like width. Let's call that width. Call that depth. It could be either way. And this would be height. Oops, height. So I'm jumping around here because my brain's firing off and I'm trying to get all this down in words. But you need it in your understanding. So you're always thinking when you're drawing in forms of width, depth, height, the 3 axes like that. Or you could do it this way, like in 3D drawing, right? And it's turning. So if you get your understanding to absorb all these forms and study them in nature, then when you try and draw, like say that marble method, construct bodies and figures or buildings or cars or what have you, you can do it because you understand the forms and you know them and in your head, and you understand what they would look like from different angles, and you understand how the shapes and lines that derive from them will appear different from different angles. And so that will give you more variety in your drawing. Because if you memorize drawing, like if I draw an arm like this, you know, I'll just do it. I don't even have it memorized, but I'll draw it like Bruce Timm. I'll just do a swoop here and there, and I'll draw Batman. There he is. I do this, and it's like an ABC thing. This is not a good Bruce Timm drawing, but if you memorize a set of formulas, flat formulas, flat, fixed, linear formulas, that's like, I don't know, memorizing music where you just know, a few chords and you just change the combinations of them. You're not really 3-dimensionally drawing. What you need to do is go back and look at these forms and, think this way, kind of like center line, construction. This is like a cone. My hand's a bit wobbly. I haven't had enough coffee today, but and then you're lining up these points. See what I mean? And then if you say you have a cylinder here, this is something to get into in another drawing, but say there's a cylinder and you're drawing something and it intersects this, okay? So here's the baseline of the cylinder. Hopefully this is coming through on the video. Baseline, this is the edge of the cylinder as you see it. But if you're working with construction lines, this would be like the baseline here, and it hits the cylinder, and then you go like this, and here's the top line of the cylinder. And then you know, okay, when this cylinder hits this cone, there's actually those are the 2 points I know where it's going to hit. And you can go on to develop, I'll show this in another video called projections. There's a whole bunch I could do. This would have to do with projections and intersections. Intersections is where two forms meet. And it's about the line, and here you get in a kind of an ellipse. It's about understanding the line of what you would get when these forms meet. So you'd end up with this. You wouldn't show, oops, you wouldn't show all the final construction lines. You'd probably do those in blue. And if you understand this stuff and do it enough, you don't even need to bother to some extent. If you're trying to do 100% accurate drawing, of course you're going to construct it very carefully and meticulously. But if you're just free-forming stuff and you're drawing, I don't know, some kind of town or something, you're thinking about intersections and about being honest, form honesty, I call it. You know, let's say you have a chimney here, it's a cylinder, right? And could be anything. You see where I'm going with this. You're lining this up. And it gives your drawing a solidity. Oops, that's out of skew because these lines have to, for perspective, these lines have to parallel nicely. They have to arc along like this, see? Which is another thing you can practice. You can practice doing smooth arcs and or curving them, you know. Depends on what you're drawing. Yeah, so that's straying off again from intersections into a little bit of a perspective about construction. And the main thing too is looping back to the beginning. So this video has a theme. I wanted to point out that you need a knowledge of forms, and then you can understand things like the shapes that get generated from them. And I'll get Twiggy here again. And the lines, line shapes and forms. It's like a basic thing about drawing. And if you distinguish those clearly and don't confuse them, because I've done it enough times myself, like you call a shape a line or a form a shape, typically. But say to my friend Twiggy here, I showed in another video, it's like if you looked at it this way, I'll try and do it from the camera. Again, this is just very rough because I can't really see my camera very clearly, but I've got an aspect almost like this. If I did an engineering drawing of Twiggy here, this is really not very great, but I think you'll see the idea. And then I'll draw it from the side. I'll just sketch it, you know, so trying to keep it consistent. So Twiggy from the side has like, I've shortened it so it fits on the camera here, but you know, and then this bump here, say, would be there. This is consistent, so let's make just a cylinder, even though it's not, just for fun. Okay, so this would be front, side, and then if I made top up here, I'd project these lines here. And you can see that Twiggy, you know, I could do anything. I could make Twiggy like a little irregular here, but let's make it a lot simpler than Twiggy really is. It would be something like this. Maybe it slims out a bit from the top. So you have like a three-view engineering drawing. And again, what's the point of this? The point is to understand. I'm going to close on this because here's me hammering away at the point. The point. What's the point, Paul? The point is understand things in 3 dimensions in your mind if you can, and you can certainly develop this if you find it difficult. And to develop it, you start with simpler things like cubes. You might make something like this and just draw it from different angles and different distances. Because the closer it gets, the more extreme the angles get, if you can see that. See how these converge? But then if I put it further away, the convergence is less extreme. That's the amount that it converges, these lines. But it's putting all these forms in your head. I showed this in other videos. Here's my little balsa wood model of the rib cage. And you could make one of this, and I didn't want to mark this up, but you could put grid lines on this and get used to drawing it 3-dimensionally. And if you just do, you know, make yourself do these things, it might seem tedious at first, like, oh, Mom, why do I have to do my homework? But if you do it, you'll find that it actually, number one, becomes fun. Number two, you will remember it later, and you'll rapidly be able to draw with much more solidity than if you just kind of fake it till you make it, cheat, and never think about this stuff. And if your drawing is just an assemblage of kind of riffs from different artists, I mean, that can be okay. My point here is not to put anyone down. I don't really care. I mean, draw whatever you want. I believe in freedom. But for anyone interested in what my journey has been, the journey, that's my journey, is I want a more comprehensive, deeper understanding of form in my mind, turn anything from any angle, so that when I imagine imaginary scenes, I'm thinking of them as solid three-dimensional structures from these angles, and I can visualize something from different angles. It's like what a 3D program would do, but you do it inside your own head, and it's really quite fun and remarkable, and I think it deepens your command, and you can turn things and shift them. Anyway, there you go. There's a ton more to this, but I hope that's given what's called food for thought for people. And the pitch at the end always comes. If you like my content, please do subscribe, like, comment, share, inscribe, describe, reshare, all that stuff, because it really does help my videos get noticed, and I want to keep building my channel, because I figure there's probably people out there who also love drawing and might not have heard some of this stuff. So there you go. More videos soon. Thank you.